I just got done streaming Neverness to Everness day 1. A lot of mixed opinions have been posted online concerning the game, ranging from combat, character models, animations, bugs, but at the end of the day, this is a closed beta test. I want to warn you, I want to note here that what we see during this test phase is not indicative of the final product, the game that we will have at launch. This is not indicative of what we will even experience in the next beta test. The point, what I want to talk about is my experience over the course of 5-6 hours streaming it. These are not my final beta impressions. I will have those appropriately summarized in a dedicated video at some point next week after the test phase has ended and I've spent dozens of hours within it. But we should not judge this as a full, complete game in the state that it is in. That is disingenuous. What we should be doing rather is complimenting what the game did right and criticizing what the game did wrong. That way, the devs know where to improve, where they have done well. Otherwise, it's just unnecessary hate, and the genre is already full of that. Let's go ahead here and start off with the positive first, the cutscenes. The cutscenes are some of the best designed I have seen in the gacha genre. They are fluid, they are expressive, they are animated, they are beautiful. And this is coming from someone that has played an extensive amount of Wuthering Waves and quite a bit of Zenless Zone Zero. If Neverness launched in the form it is in, at least concerning the animations, the expressions, this game could rival the best games out there. The cutscenes were stunning, absolutely beautiful. I could not believe what was rendered in the game, that this was done from the same people that animated Tower of Fantasy. The world is stunning. Now, we only had access to a small section of the map during this test phase, but what we got to experience in that world, in that small little condensed environment, were buses, trains, swimming, wall climbing, wall running, battles, driving. We got to see a variety of different environments, beaches, beautiful forests, messed up like interdimensional environment. Like the scenery in this game was beautiful. They have done a phenomenal job of creating a stunning open world to explore, to consume, to make it feel lived in. The game has diverse areas, NPCs populating it. Now, granted, there were a lot of reused NPCs. I think there were numerous times where I saw like 13 of the same lady running around with her hands over her head in the same outfit with the same hairstyle. So her mother probably had fun with that event. My God, I feel like this is one of the most vibrant, beautiful gacha games on the horizon. After watching the trailers, I didn't expect it to look as good as it does, and that might be because I have a really good computer. The trailers did not do what I saw justice at all. The exploration was a ton of fun, being able to run around the world. Okay, admittedly, running around the world was very slow. I feel like they need to like boost the speed at which you sprint, because you move really, really slow. It's actually kind of irritating at times, but the driving aspect was a ton of fun. I wish we could hit pedestrians. I feel like that's like a common shared sentiment amongst the community, but driving the car was a ton of fun. The controls were surprisingly decent. I feel like having numerous different modes of transportation and exploration was a lot of fun. I love the dark horror aesthetic that this game seems to have, that Polaroid world. Man, was it an absolute messed up, enjoyable experience. Something that was, I mean, I guess that we got to experience recently in WuWa as well, but for whatever reason, gacha games tend to steer clear of dark, messed up, even though that's like my favorite style of storytelling. Which, once again, let me just backtrack a minute here. The cutscenes, how they actually tell the story, that was something that I did not expect. Due to the expressive nature of the characters, due to the animation of the characters, the story was told in a captivating way that actually enthralled you with what was going on. Now, going back to the Polaroid area, which had that dark horror theme, I will note there were quite a number of bugs that I happened to encounter in the beta test. Once again, this is a beta, so it is to be expected. But man, this bug in specific with the boss was almost game breaking for me. I think it took like 15 minutes to kill this thing because there was a boundary set, and essentially what happened was the boundary moved, so I could no longer reach the boss, and it allowed for me to actually go beyond the confines, the limitations of the battle area. This is something that is definitely gonna need to be looked into and fixed. Granted, there were other bugs as well, but none nearly remotely close to being as game breaking as that was. I think the characters themselves actually look, for the most part, better than I thought they were going to. I think the texture quality for the characters is great. I think the characters themselves are a little too small. And by that I mean, Genshin has this weird, like, character style where they feel like small little characters with big heads. That's something that Zenless doesn't have. It's something that Honkai Star Rail doesn't have. It's something that Wuthering Waves doesn't have. But for whatever reason, Neverness seems to have smaller characters with bigger heads, and that's not something I'm overly fond of. The characters did look good, and I think the characters in Genshin look great as well. I love the characters in Genshin. I just prefer the more stretched out, more life-size, three-dimensional characters in the aforementioned titles. I think that could definitely use some improvement. The running animations were actually really good. When I watched the trailer, I thought the running animations looked bad. I don't know if they fixed them, but they felt really good. Unfortunately, because the characters generally look as good as they do, the protagonist, the white-haired girl, looks incredibly generic. Having such beautiful looking characters, actually, and one of my viewers said this beautifully, very eloquently, having such beautiful characters amplify how generic the main character looks. And she really does. She looks like an NPC, and that is not a compliment. And I also want to note here, we saw numerous NPCs in the game that look better than the player character. Yeah. What I think is the most important thing to touch on here, though, is the combat. I've spoken to a lot of creators, I've spoken to a lot of viewers, and one thing that seems to be a resounding sentiment in the community is the combat is underwhelming. It doesn't matter that almost every other aspect of this game has been great, at least a 7 or 8 out of 10. The combat so far has been very underwhelming. The combat is slow, it lacks weight, it lacks impact, it feels stale, already boring and slow, flat. When you're gonna end up spending the vast majority of your time engaged in combat, you want something fast, you want something fluid, you want something impactful. That just wasn't the case with this. Not that the combat is bad, but when you are forced to compete with Wuthering Waves and Zenless Zone Zero in terms of quality action combat, you need to come close to, if not exceed them, when you are a game that is yet to release, not fall short of achieving the level of quality that they exude. Love or hate Zenless, love or hate Wuwa, there is no denying that both games have arguably the best action combat the genre has to offer. And at least in its current form, Neverness doesn't. It falls short of that mark. But, and I have to stress this repeatedly because people are going to latch on to these things that I say and take them out of context, this is a beta test. Everything we are experiencing here will change potentially drastically between now and release. With this in mind, it is imperative that we tell the devs where they need to improve, where they need to focus, what needs to be done. They are listening, and they are going to make sufficient, adequate changes to their game to make sure it is a success. If we are not giving them constructive criticism, they're not going to know where to improve. And if they don't know where to improve, even though we have issues with the game, then when other people get to play it publicly and they run into the issues that we could have prevented, it is then our fault. Thus, it is our responsibility to tell them, no, guys, the combat needs to be reworked. It needs a lot of improvement. Granted, that is one of the few areas that generally does. Everything will continue to be touched up between now and release, but the combat specifically, the combat is very underwhelming. Additionally, I want to point out here, one thing I also dislike about the combat, the dodging system. Not only is your dodge literally like 1 foot in length, but having or being limited to 3 dodges when each dodge has a 4 or 5 second cooldown is obnoxiously bad. That needs to be changed too. We either need 5 dodges, 10 dodges, or limit the dodges instead to stamina and have it consume stamina, because limiting it to 3 is just bad design. All in all, playing Neverness day 1 was a ton of fun. This was significantly better than I thought it was going to be. I have very few concerns with it right now, but the combat needs to be a focal point, needs to be a topic of discussion, because at the end of the day, right now, that is the only area of the game that they have underwhelmed me in. Otherwise, I've had a ton of fun. I've enjoyed myself. I'm gonna be streaming more of it today, and I genuinely look forward to seeing how everything continues to evolve.
Hey you, where do you think you're going? Don't you close out of this tab. I didn't give you permission to do that. Sit your ass back down. Click one of the 2 videos that are gonna be on screen in just a moment and keep watching my content. Keep enjoying my content.